exactly as built. And there are several reasons for that. One is that the idea of this meeting was to share experiences, good bits, bad bits of the different routes people are taking. Everybody's doing something different. They might be doing the very bare minimum to satisfy the deadline compliance. They might be doing full on the whole shebang, building up to the Building Safety Act, or somewhere in the middle. Some are looking at purely over 18 meters. Some are thinking, well, you know, it's going to come down to 11, so we need to at least have that on our radar. So the idea of this meeting was to actually have a look at what different people are doing. But I've been having a number of one-to-one meetings with people. Obviously some of the people here would have been in those, which we're building out into having small group meetings, because I think people are more relaxed to talk about the good side and the bad side of what they're doing in a smaller group. In a big group, you tend to be in a defensive position almost, to defend what you're doing as being the right thing. Whereas in a smaller group, it's a bit more relaxed. So that's, I think, and that's what we've decided, we as in everybody I've met over the last month or so in those small meetings, the groups and the one-to-ones, that's kind of the route we're going to take. So there will be a few examples a bit later, but for this meeting, this is it's going to be a little bit of a surprise actually, because we've got a very interesting guest in the meeting who'll be I'll be talking to in about half an hour, who's going to be telling you some very interesting things that you won't be expecting to hear. And I'll be asking him some questions, and we're going to throw it open to the floor to also answer for him to answer some questions. So to start off with, what we're going to do now, Matt Hodges-Long, who, as you know, was one of the organisers of these the initial fire chiefs meetings. He had a big meeting yesterday. Over 300 people actually turned up on that, which is quite an astonishing achievement, I think, on LinkedIn. So, Matt, do you want to just have a quick 5 minutes on, you know, where you've gone and where it's going post the last couple of meetings?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Yeah. No, I wish 300 had turned up. Over 300 registered, and I think about 150 actually turned up.
Well, that's still amazing, isn't it?
Which is still quite good. And it was also testing the new to me feature on LinkedIn of a LinkedIn audio event, which is all booked and held within LinkedIn. And I think it was okay. I think there was just if anyone else is thinking of doing it, there isn't anything like recording. You can get hijacked as well, in the sense that you can't keep people out. So when it goes up to go, if anybody's aware that it's going live, they can just jump in. So we had to keep everyone muted. But you know, aside from that, it was good. There was a good turnout, and it was a bit different. So enough about that. What we learned from it. So I got Sandy Thompson from NFCC here. I don't know whether there's anyone from Fire Chiefs here today. Whether Ashley's arrived or anyway, I'm sure they'll put their hand up if they are. But just getting a latest update from that. Say again.
Ashley is here.
Ashley is here. Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. So Sandy, one of Ashley's colleagues, joined me on that, and I think some of the key takeaways from that were that the Home Office guidance is pretty much finished its sign-off process, and is awaiting, as I understand it, sign off from the new Fire Minister. So the latest sort of estimate is around about sort of the end of the first week of December for the guidance to come out. And what I undertook to do was, as soon as I'm aware of it, I'll put that onto our resource centre. So anyone that signed up to the Fire Safety England Regs resource centre with us will get a notification that it's available, just a signposting, but also I'm sure I and lots of other people, once they see it, will stick it all over social media. So I think it'd be pretty hard to miss it. There wasn't really any clarity about what the promotional plan was going to be from the Home Office or from the fire services themselves. but I'm sure they will be making everybody aware. There is also some additional guidance being worked on. Sorry, my dog's making a noise. Some additional guidance being worked on specifically around fire door checks, which I think is going to come a bit later. There were lots of discussion points that we had around sort of the potential attitudes towards enforcement that maybe we'll pick up on a bit later. And then sort of getting into some of the detail, which is difficult ahead of the guidance, but around interpretations of some of the regulations, you know, so when you've got to provide fire safety information to residents, existing residents, is that within the first year of the regulations, or do you need to have that in place before the regulations, or as the regulations go live on the 23rd of Jan? And there was discussions around those sorts of interpretations. Plenty of conversation around secure information boxes again, and how to keep the content up to date and assurance. Nothing else particularly sort of earth-shattering in terms of timing. It was Sandy did talk about it would appear that the fire services, most of them are adopting the NFCC templates for the wall information and fault reporting, etc. The majority are I think what they're doing is create, and maybe Ashley can come in a minute, but are creating their own forms versions of the sort of standard form that was shared with us before. And then I think a few of them are using other applications to gather the same type of information, but on a different platform or different platforms. So there isn't a single, as we talked about before, a one platform covers all fire services approach. There will be some nuances between the 43 different fire services. So that was a bit of feedback on that, but I don't think there was any, from as I understood it, any sort of major pushback from any of the fire services to say, no, we're doing this in a completely different way. We're asking a completely different set of questions. There seems to be alignment there. And there was a discussion around the fact that the question set and the means of questioning may well evolve over time, because ultimately it's not until you start loading thousands of buildings worth of information through that process that people realize, oh, hang on, I guess question 24 is missing, or question 22 is redundant, or whatever that is. So that was the feedback really from the fire chiefs, but I feel terrible talking about the fire chiefs when the fire chiefs are actually on the call. So I don't know whether I can bring Ashley up if he's willing to fade his mic up and tell me that I've misrepresented
You're
him.
leading very nicely into it, Matt.
Oh, Sandy's
actually.
here.
It's
Sandy's
a good
well.
bridge. It's a very good bridge. Sandy or Ashley, have you got? You tell us from your perspective where we are at.
I'll just reiterate what Matt's just said. I suppose that the work that NFCC did really was trying to establish the consistent question set. And you'd seen, a lot of you may have seen the previous versions, which they have changed slightly. It's a slightly refined question set, but we are expecting all fire services to adopt them. Around the IT side, as Matt said, a lot of them are probably using a Microsoft Forms approach. Some of them might have slightly different systems. But I suppose it's just to perhaps make some of you aware that from, I suppose, communicating with fire services, those that haven't been able to or won't be able to get an IT solution perhaps set up as a point of entry for RPs externally, they've got plans in place to contact RPs directly around that. Again, because this is the high-rise buildings only, where the fire services already know those buildings, there might not be public facing forms available. They might be coming to you directly, but even so, there should be still I suppose a information, like a landing page on their website that just kind of sets that scene. So I suppose that's the only other difference. That's what just to be aware of. I don't know if Sandy's got anything else to chuck in there.
Yeah, sorry for being a bit late this morning, and Matt. Yeah, so with respect to that, Ashley, could you take over a second, please? My dog's just gone crazy.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not sure what the point Sandy was going to add it. And I suppose just to reiterate the timescales that Matt spoke about. So next week we're hoping that the government guidance will go live, and that's the point when NFCC want to have our page live, which will then act as a bridge between the government guidance and each of the fire services' own kind of entry points for that information sharing. Again, some of them may not be, some of the individual fire services may not be ready to go just yet. They may be holding pages in place, but obviously they're all very aware of the commencement date. So it's if your fire service is not quite ready yet, I would suggest, you know, perhaps a couple of weeks breathing space just to kind of give them time to kind of sort their systems out. But certainly by the new year, we would expect it to be very clear from all fire services what you need to do.
Excellent, excellent. Sandy, do you want to add something in there?
I think hopefully Ashley's just covered that. We're pretty confident the guidance will be going live as of the week commencing the 5th, which is good. And as hopefully Ashley's covered, within that there'll be several links to our signposting page, which will take you to the Fire and Rescue Service to upload the information. So, but as Ashley's, I think he was saying there that not all Fire and Rescue Services are going to be ready.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that, and I know some of the larger housing providers are quite keen to get this process going of get the information into the Fire and Rescue Services, but they're not quite ready yet to receive it, most of them. So just have that communication. If you want to put a lot of information to the forward that information, you know, prior to the 23rd of January, please contact your local fire and rescue service and look at different options if they're not quite ready to be set up in the system to receive it online through the forms, etc. Yeah.
Excellent, brilliant, excellent. George, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question of Sandy and Ashley. I went to the Homes UK exhibition last week, and there was several stands where they were promoting the fact that they had the golden thread solution. And I went onto one of them, which is being used by a number of our members, and that basically they explained to me that what they do is they produce a digital twin, and you know, it's all in 3D. And they said that they'd been speaking with all the fire brigades, all the fire rescue authorities, and that's what the fire authorities want. They want a 3D model that they can fly around. Now that's sort of contradictory to what I've understood. That, you know, I just wondered whether that was actually right.
I think it will be dependent on who they spoke to in a fire and rescue service. I imagine the one you're talking about, and it does look very good. So we've probably caught the eye of a few individuals in the fire and rescue services, but there's nothing saying of a particular type of building information management platform which anyone will be using just yet. I mean, I think there's a realization there's quite a few different private enterprises out there looking at developing such tools. I think the problem is, as I said, what we probably want to not have is probably about 6 or 7 different options coming into one fire and rescue service, because that will be a huge headache of how they access information. I think we're not. The golden thread is a project which is ongoing at the moment, and there's no real clarity of what particular platform will be used going forward. Is the answer really on that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm going to cover a little bit of that later in terms of what's happening. But the reason I'm asking the question is that producing the basic floor plans, which Matt's been identifying the core documents, I think it is something that we need to make sure that RPs do appreciate that there's some basic information that needs to be generated. By all means, we should have the ability to also share something a bit more elegant, a little bit more, you know, 3D models and things like that. But that should not. There needs to be the basics being covered. That was I guess my point.
I think it's trying to understand why these one of the reasons why these regs are there, to have additional information for our crews on the ground at incidents, to be able to
Sure.
plan for incidents and be able to perform better with better information at an incident. And we don't have the hardware in the fire and rescue services to receive that sort of IT solution to come through to be used at a fire ground as yet. I mean, I think there's some great ideas out there, and if, you know, the actual going forward could be, you know, great, but the hardware isn't there for the fire and rescue services on the ground, and that will be that's the kind of deciding factor at the moment.
Yeah, that's coming out a lot in my meetings. It's all very well having all the bells and whistles, but if the expertise and the as you say, the hardware isn't actually there, then what are the fire services going to actually do with it?
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew Holly.
Yeah, I've had a couple of meetings to find these sort of bits of kit and compare some, and some are rubbish and some are very, very good. And one of the leading one that does a digital twin and hints about digital twin quite a lot. So I think we know, if you know them, you might know what they're talking about. They were saying different things for different people. So without the hardware, most of their gear is on a website. So all you need to do is get to a website. And then there was the main stuff, like, as you say, the very important floor plans. That's for guys on the ground on paperwork. No problem with that. But the 3D modelling probably, in a lot of cases, wouldn't necessarily be used in a fire situation, but it could be used for orientation and training and, you know, that sort of thing. So it's different bits of kit for different times, if you like. So that was the point. So not having any hardware or software required, not an app, you just go to their website and there you are. You might have a login, that's about all you'll need, really. But they did suggest that one of the ways you could use the 3D modelling in a fire is if it was very smoke logged, you could the ground crews could follow the model up the building and then tell the guys, you know, it's the third door on the left, because they're following where the real guys are going, and using it that way. So there was a couple of applications that you could do the complicated modeling, but a lot of the time they were saying it's just useful for orientation and, you know, in station training and that sort of thing. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Okay, Matt.
Yes, just a quick observation on that. I think if we go back to the fundamental principles of why the regulations were produced in response to Grenfell, the way I look at this at the moment, it's great to do these technically complex things, but the reality is, you know, if you've got fire doors, are they hanging off the hinges? If you've got an AOV system, is it working? When did you last check it? Have you identified what's going on with the external wall potentially that could cause issues? Really, I think there's always a propensity to run away with technology, and I don't think so. I think the Building Safety Act has probably exacerbated that by talking about golden threads, and different people, that will mean different things to different people. But if you look at the custody of information and the evidence you are doing repetitive tasks, to my mind, that's the start of the golden thread. Don't just tell me you do fire risk assessments. Where are they? When were they last done? When do they need to be done again? Have you managed the actions? Those sorts of things. So I think, yeah, I like technology. I love to, it all gets very exciting, doesn't it? I had a conversation this morning with somebody that was talking about, in relation to the regs, it was a question that came in after yesterday. Oh, well, if we've got remote monitoring on our fire lifts, you know, does that mean we don't have to go to site? We can just put that in the monthly check. I don't know if it's sufficient, but the reality is we're starting from a very low base in a lot of cases. And I think it's about, what I like about the fire safety regs is, send me a few pieces of information as the fire safety, but you all need to do it. I don't want a 3D model for 2 of the 500 buildings I'm looking after. I want the basics for all 500, and then we can build from there. So That would be my take on it, that technologists tend to run away with their technology rather than actually saying, why do we need this solution? We do need to dumb it down. I think the reality is we need to get really back to basics and send some basic stuff to the fire service and make sure we keep it up to date, and share some basic stuff with our residents and make sure we keep that up to date. And we can evidence doing all of those things would just be my take on it. But yeah, technology, great. Love models, love playing with tech, but let's get the basics. Let's run before we walk.
One step at a
let's
time.
have the technology for a reason, rather than technology being a reason in and of itself, which is often the case with technology companies. It's led by the technology rather than the market or the need. George, do you want to give us because there's quite a lot of new people on the call. Do you want to give us kind of a run through on where we are and how we got here and moving forward?
Yep. Thank you. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so for the new people, I don't know if you're aware, but BIM4Housing was highlighted within Ben Judith's original report, and obviously this is the thing that we're all that's driving things now with the responsibilities. And the tier one contractors are becoming very active in this now as well, in understanding what their responsibilities are, which I think is encouraging because it's causing them to think differently about how they're delivering the buildings. And one of the key things I think now is that what we need to be doing against things like fire doors that Matt mentioned earlier is look at that from an asset management perspective, but also look at it from a compliance perspective. And increasingly, we've got to be also capturing information about performance from a point of view of embodied carbon. So that's really where we need better information management. So basically, when we took over BIM4Housing about 2.5 years ago, we set up different working groups, because the fact is that different people within the process need different information. So we were looking at things from a point of view of how can we make things better by providing better information, rather than looking at BIM from a point of view of 3D modeling. And so as a result of that, we took from each of the working groups. So we've got 6 working groups, each of which has got probably 30 people involved in it. And we identified certain topics. So one, for example, was data. And as a result of that, we've produced standardized information requirements with HACT, Housing Association Charitable Trust, and also data templates. We did a major exercise with MMC and produced some training material with the Supply Chain Sustainability School. Probably the biggest work stream has been fire safety, and an element of that is producing method statements for a number of critical asset types, which I'll show you shortly. Sustainability, we've now partnered with Zero, which is a growing movement on the reduction of carbon. And also we're building tools or methods of creating procedural guidance and also product data libraries. As a result of all that work, we were asked by L&Q to join the Golden Thread initiative that they'd set up. And there were 10 working groups. We were responsible for the asset and survey information group. And the task that we were sort of given was by the HSE was what data do people need on AOVs and smoke dampers? And in many cases, the answer was it depends, because actually there are 800 standards that are referenced in building regs. So what we did, we've we've focused on 250 asset types, which gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to resolve things. And the working groups that we've been running over the last 18 months or so, we've had 150 workshops that 300 people have been great volunteers and contributing to. And the approach that we're taking in terms of the fire doors, for example, was not so much what do we need to do to a fire door. It was more about what risk is that fire door mitigating, what is a hazard, etc. And also, what do people do to it to stop it from working? That's been a really rich set of information that we've been getting back. And then we come down to what information is needed. And different people need different information, whether they're designing, installing, maintaining, inspecting, or recycling. Then what method statements and procedures are needed. So that comes back to the detail of what are auditable tasks and the level of competency that needs to be in place. And then finally, how should product changes be recorded? So we've held these workshops, and the workshops include people from different working groups or different areas. So that, for example, is the manufacturers group. And then round here, we've got the designers group. This was a live event that we held at Digital Construction Week, but we've been holding these on Teams. And all of this information is actually on our website.
Yeah, sorry, can I just say, on the Teams meeting, there are rather more people there.
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, so as far as the outputs from the Golden Thread is concerned, we've produced a data set of the documents and information that's needed to put together a safety case. When that's available, if you want to use that. Also, there was a lot of work went in with another group within the GTI on visual records and also on specifications, so the design side of things. And that in itself has been really instructive, because it's causing people to actually look at the gateways to say, when do we need information? So here, for example, what we've done is overlaid the gateways against the REBA planner work, so that we can actually say here, for example, at Gateway 2, the design really needs to be complete. And that includes products being selected, so that we're not selecting products once construction's already started. That's going to be a massive change. And Dame Judith gave a webinar week before last, where she was warning people that if they think they've got through Gateway 2 and then it's in plain sailing, that isn't going to be the case. They will be picked up if they've not used the products that were agreed at Gateway 2. And if they have changed, then there's got to be a legitimate reason for that. So that was very interesting. And importantly, it's got to be done carrying forward. So it's a very different sort of world that we're moving into. And one of the things that we've done is identified what is going to be required at certain work stages, or that's the indication that we've interpreted from the guidance. This is where the information sits. So I'll just show you that briefly. So if you want to go and look at the resources that we've got available, this is the BIM4Housing website. We've got details on the working groups there, and the people that have been involved in those. So Will Perkins there, that's leading the manufacturing group. We've then got the individual work streams. And again, here we've got the fire safety work stream, and we've got information about the different meetings that have taken place. So we try and evidence what what's happened. And in each of these meetings, we're recording them so that we can actually have this was the previous meetings of this particular session. So you can go in here and you can see what Sandy and Ashley and people were providing us originally. So all of that's available, freely available. The final thing I'll refer to is the black box. So the black box allows us to hold in here. We've got people uploading things that they're coming across. So and this is in its infancy, but here, for example, if we can come across examples of things that haven't been done properly, so that we can learn from them. So the idea of the black box is really to follow through what's used in aviation to eliminate problems based on those sorts of experiences. And then finally, the publications themselves are in the black box, or you can just get to them here. So we've got guidance on smoke dampers, fire dampers, and the like, and I'll just show you an example of that. So this is, for example, for a fire door. This is the format of all 12 data sets. So we've got a breakdown of what a fire door is made up of, the risks it's mitigating, what do people do to them to stop them from working. I didn't appreciate that painting over a door would cause that problem, but it makes a lot of sense. And then looking at things in detail about the from a point of view of what do you need to do in terms of door closers, etc. Then going on to tasks. So identifying what tasks need to be carried out for what purpose, for inspection, for maintenance, the level of competencies needed, and finally, product change. So those resources are all available to you if you're interested in going on and looking through those. So what we're trying to do is use this in a practical way to say, if a fire breaks out, maybe in a kitchen, and that's generating smoke, how can we ensure that the information that we've got about the compartmentation, or maybe the automatic opening vents, or the smoke control, or indeed the fire alarm system, will perform? So this is work that we're actually doing at the moment. We've got some models that we're working through, and what this is very interesting is that it's enabling the experts, the subject matter experts, to actually say, well, under these circumstances, this is how we need to ensure people can either stay put or escape. And if they're going to escape, then either way, let's make sure that the assets that are in place have actually been inspected properly, so that we know that when they're called upon, they're going to perform. Because in this particular case, you've got 3 treatments, as the HSE call them: compartmentation, smoke control, and detection. And each of those has got individual assets. And if, for example, the fire door works perfectly, but if the dampers or the penetration seals fail, then really the fact that the fire door performed perfectly doesn't actually help. So this is the sort of methodology that we're following, with having standardized libraries that can then be used to create, this is the BIM process of creating information requirements that can then be tested against manufactured products to make sure that manufacturers are providing the information that is needed. Then however the models are created, can then be items can be located in them, and therefore that enables you to create something that is then sustainable going forward. Now, whether that is whatever software solution is being used, and I think most people know that ActiveCloud has a software solution that is doing a lot of these things, but we're one of many. What's critical about this is that we exchange information in a standardized format. And the standardized format that is the industry standard is COBie. And this is what we should all ensure, that all of the applications that are being used at least conform with that basic standard. So this is the British standard. There's also the new Fiery standard, which is this is BS 8644. And the importance about this is that those are the BIM standards there for describing fire rating and smoke security, thermal transmittance. So you see the terminology there, that's constructed around the way the BIM process works. These are very similar descriptions, but under this is information that's come through from the fire specialists. And they're using the same methodology, which is the COBie methodology, to do it. This may be getting into the weeds for a lot of people, but it is critical, because unless we get these terminologies working properly, then different systems won't be able to exchange information. And this is the updated version of that, which is emerging. And one of the things that we are also looking at now within BIM4Housing is providing a free data sheet library that manufacturers will be able to provide their data sheets to. And it's our intention to try and do that so that if you need a data sheet on a product, there'll be a single place that you can actually get it from, which doesn't cost anything. So that's really well.
But hasn't that already been done, George? There are quite a number of these, aren't there?
The product data information, they're all charged for services, to my knowledge. So the manufacturers have to pay to put their information on them, and also they're all different. So each of the different suppliers is using different formats for their information. We're looking at doing something here that's far less ambitious. Because there's already work underway with the Construction Products Association to create something called Lexicon, which is a universal database. But that's taking some time to pull together because it's complicated. There's a lot of complexity in that. What we're doing here is just looking at something very basic, and that is just having a PDF data sheet of a product that's classified. It's got so it's got the right Uniclass classification, the right naming, and you've therefore got something about the smoke detectors that can be put together into O&Ms. So that's an exercise. If anybody's interested in that, we're hoping to be launching that shortly, and we can keep people in touch. Okay, that's where.
Okay, excellent. Oh, I was just going to say, anybody got any questions? And Sandy put his hand up straight away.
Hi, George. Within that data sheet, will it give commissioning and testing information? Do you know?
That's the intention. So let me just clarify that. The commissioning information, yes, most certainly, but that will be coming from the project itself. So the commissioning information that you will get from a manufacturer is the procedure that you'd expect that product to be commissioned against, if that makes sense. The commissioning information from the project, yes, most certainly, but that wouldn't be in that product library. It would be actually in the project, which certainly from ActivePlan's point of view, we capture that, and there's other applications that do that as well. So it's a matter of just coordinating that. The critical thing with it, Sandy, is to actually have the information about that particular item, so that it isn't normally in operating and maintenance information. You don't have an explicit set of data about a product. You might have a range of products. Invariably, what we find is that when you open up the O&M manual, you find that there's probably 5 or 6 different products referred to, and you've then got to pick out which one might have been used, and you don't necessarily know. Also, the commissioning information is often handwritten, or it's not in a machine readable format or a standardized format, and that is something that we are also looking to try and achieve. But it's baby steps along the
Okay,
way.
anybody else got any questions? No? Okay, so we're going to move forward now into and introduce our special guest. George, could you stop sharing?
Sorry.
Thanks, sorry. One thing that's, as I mentioned earlier, I've been holding a lot of one-to-one meetings with HAs, LAs. Incidentally, if anybody would like to join in that process, put a note in the chat to Jess, and he'll pick that up. We're holding smaller meetings as well, as say, to like really get into the nitty-gritty of what we're doing. Now, what has come up from everybody is about the lack of clarity as to what is exactly required. We're not just talking about the fire safety, we're talking also the Building Safety Act. Well, we have with us a gentleman who should be able to tell us absolutely everything, because he is the man who's actually been guiding and instructing and informing the very MPs that passed these acts. He's here with us today. His name is Chris Waterman, and George is going to finish off his intro, and then I'll be on. You carry on, George.
Yeah, it was just that I was at Homes UK last week, and I was sitting in the audience, and Chris mentioned that he's actually producing a 2-page guide to the Building Safety Act, which that impressed me hugely.
Yeah.
So I've connected up with Chris, and he's kindly offered to come along today. He's also interested in the feedback that you guys have got as well. So hand over to Chris.
Yeah, Chris, if you'd like to just overview what you're doing, and then I can perhaps ask you some questions, if that's okay.
Okay, if I could start with a 2-pager. Oh, sorry, it's on the, and I'm squatting in an MP's office. So if she bursts in, then I may have to run up the corridor with my laptop.
Sorry, can I ask everybody to turn their cameras off so that we can see Chris a bit bigger rather than stuck in the corner?
Right, shall I carry on?
Yes, please.
Yes, yeah, sorry, Chris.
Okay, just before Labour left office, I produced this.
All right.
And Labour were going to totally reorganise 16 to 19 education. So this is 2 sides of A4 or 1 side of A3. And the concept was developed by Toyota. And if you Google lean A3, you'll find out about it. So I wasn't quite doing what George said I was going to do, but I am working on it. So my role in this is essentially working. I'm a director of a company called AAA, and we have a very narrow specific focus on personal emergency evacuation plans. And that's how I got into this whole business. When the Fire Safety Act, flimsy little thing, I think it runs to 2.5 sides. You've all seen this. I was involved in the discussions in the Commons and the Lords about the Fire Safety Act. and in particular, the objections or the amendments that the government ultimately refused to add. Now, I work for 4 or 5 peers and half a dozen MPs on building safety, fire safety. It's a new hobby of mine since about 3 years ago. And essentially, it's going to revolutionize the industry. It's going to change the culture. Somebody earlier mentioned baby steps. I think we need a few strides, because the Fire Safety Act, with the January deadline, is serious enough. The Building Safety Act, I don't know if any of you have seen it, it's a snip at £37.65, and it comes with the explanatory notes. And I think the whole package is £80, and it's about 700 pages. And I'm not going to get that on 2 sides of A4, but I am producing a plain guide to it. And on the Fire Safety Act, it went from the Commons to the Lords and back again, this process called ping pong. And I was working quite a lot with Lord Adonis, who was particularly concerned not with the fire safety bill as it then was, but the lack of parliamentary scrutiny of the bill. Then the Building Safety Bill came out, and that came out in draft form, and the draft bill was considered by what is now the Deluxe Select Committee members. And unlike Parliamentary Council, who are kept in the dark until they're needed to write legislation, all the civil servants, the majority of whom are honours graduates in the humanities, the MPs on the committee, some of them did not fit either of those criteria. So I produced a plain guide to the draft Building Safety Bill. And it was a series of A3 landscape spiral bound guides. And there was no editorial in it, but in column 1 was the Act verbatim. In column 2 were the explanatory notes verbatim. And column 3 was the case studies or examples that were included in the explanatory notes. And column 4 was left blank for your own personal notes. I had the first volume made, printed, and I sent a free copy to every member of the Bill Committee. Within a fortnight, I was the policy advisor to one of the MPs, and when the bill itself came out, the majority of members on the Bill Committee were using my plain guide because it had everything in front of them other than the amendments. And one MP said that it transformed his life. I won't comment on the sadness of some MPs, but in fact, what he meant was that he was spending 2 days a week, morning and afternoon, looking at a piece of draft a bill that was impenetrable, but using my plain guide, he was able to read across, look at every amendment and see what the bill said, what the explanatory note said, and how it was going to work. Since then, I'm now working on a plain guide to the Act, which will not be the same format, but will have the Act, the explanatory notes, any case studies or examples, and also the 28 fact sheets that were produced for the bill, but have now disappeared off the government website. So, and because of my newfound interest in building safety, I'm attending various, I went to London Build, UK Homes, there was a Ventro did something at the QE2 Centre, a masterclass, and I was in Cardiff for the FIA event. And I'm just really asking difficult questions whenever I can. That's enough from me, Richard.
Can I just ask you, those documents, those your documents, will we be able to get hold of those?
Well, interesting you can say that. I did the plain guide to the draft bill and the bill pro bono. The 28 fact sheets. Do you know about the 28 fact sheets, Richard?
I have to say, no, I don't.
Right. Well, during the bill, the government threw up 28 fact sheets in random order on the website. And I mean, there was one in particular, for example, and I'm thinking alphabetically, there's a fact sheet about the accountable person.
Yeah.
As soon as the bill became an act, they all disappeared. And I don't think you can find them now. But nothing changed between the bill and the act about accountable people. So they're all still current. And I have a publication, and what I did, 28 fact sheets, you get a cover sheet, an inside page, lots of government gloop on the front and the back. So I took all the front and back pages off and put I think it's 28, they added a couple, and they're now all in one single A4 document, which is available from me, and I'll give you the details.
That would be amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It is because I'm a self-unemployed pensioner. That is a paid for document, but it's a mere bagatelle in terms of cost. But also, what I'm doing, I'm producing these two documents as a series of A4 portrait spiral bound. So you're not juggling with that and looking for where the fact sheet is. You've got, if you want clause 73, you've got clause 73, the explanatory notes, anything else that's been published. So you're only looking in one place.
So would this be like the same as you gave to the MPs?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm thinking. The easy route through the melee, really.
Yes, and I mean the MPs, to some extent, they haven't lost interest in fire safety, but as soon as an act is an act, then they move on to the next bill.
Sure, yeah. As far as they're concerned, it's done.
However, I'm an unofficial advisor to 4 of the MPs on the Deluxe committee, and at every opportunity I am working with them to say, what about building safety? What about building safety?
Sorry, what does Deluxe mean? What does it stand for?
Oh, sorry. Deluxe is my pronunciation of the Department of Levelling Up Home, Housing and Communities.
Okay.
Sorry, but it is
no,
Deluxe.
very good, very good.
And I have disagreed with Michael Gove on everything since 2000.
You're not alone.
And if I was standing at Big Ben next to him, and I've told him this, we would not agree on the time. However, he is the best thing that's happened to building safety that I can remember. He's not in the pocket of developers. And although his ideas are sometimes wrong, he is the most effective politician in the government because he gets things done. So that's where I am, and happy to take questions, really.
That's fantastic. Has anybody got any questions for Chris? Now's your chance. If you don't understand absolutely everything about the Fire Safety Act and the Building Safety Act that applies to you, after this meeting, you have no excuses. Matt.
Yeah, it's just a quick question really around the withdrawal of all the changes between the bill and the act, and I haven't got them in front of me now for the timeline, but I think put something in the notes, there was the creation of the principal accountable person role, which was previously the AP, so I think that might be a reason. And the other key duty holder change between the two was the removal of the building safety manager as a duty holder.
Yes.
So there are some, and I don't know whether that was why they withdrew all of the fact sheets on the 25th of July. Or whether it's to do with the cut over to the new building safety regulator, because one point I wanted to raise today actually was just that the HSE have now started talking about dates, and high-rise building safe or building registration opens in April, they're suggesting, and it would need to be done by October. But there is another question that came into me that I don't have the answer from at the moment, and I don't know whether anyone knows or you know, Chris, is around the proposed tranche staging dates for occupancy, the occupancy phase for the building safety regulator. So from October 2023, there was going to be a sort of a staged rollout based on some kind of criteria. So your buildings would fall into certain tranches. And apparently that's disappeared as well. I think that's probably back to the reference sheet that's disappeared that relates to the sort of rollout plan. So I don't know whether you've got an update on that, Chris.
Okay, a couple of comments about HSE. When I was running the schools in Hillingdon, 7 children, I think it was, were swept off a rock in Plymouth, and they all drowned with their teacher. And there was a big hoo-ha about child safety. And I had a boat with some of my children sinking in the Atlantic off France. And they gave responsibility to the HSE for safety on school journeys. Now, that was a pimple compared with the body of work that the HSE was doing. I don't think building safety will be, and it should be properly resourced. But the thing that bothers, well, one of the things that bothers me is that the HSE are not producing a template for building safety cases. They've said they're not going to do it. So everyone is starting with a blank sheet of paper, and one developer that sent in a 50-page safety case for a building had to turn it into 130 pages to answer all the questions that the HSE came back with. My suspicion, and I haven't had the chance to ask the HSE this, is that they are sucking in safety cases, and then when they've got enough, they will then produce a template. But this is a massive waste of developers' resources, and it goes back to what we were saying about different formats. In 1981, the government wrote to me in Hillingdon and said, all your secondary schools that haven't got a computer, which was all of them, could have a research machine or an Acorn computer, 1981. And I got all my secondary heads into a room and I said, you've got a perfect choice in Hillingdon between research machine and Acorn. I said, there's only one condition. You're all going to make the same choice. Because I didn't want 10 schools with research machines and 10 schools with Acorns trying to swap, the old big floppy disks that would never work. And everything I've heard that you're doing is vital if it's going to be manageable. And my dream in terms of construction products is that, and looking at this and looking at the bloke that's just built my front porch, there's a hell of a distance between the two. So when he goes to Screwfix to buy the screws to fit something on my house, I need him to be safe in the knowledge they're not going to melt. So, we've got a huge way to go, but it's no good taking baby steps. We need to be taking big strides.
It needs to be in the same direction. I absolutely take the point that you're saying about consistency of information. I mean, that is one of the basic tenets of our existence at BIM4Housing, as you know. Samaya's got her hand up. Samaya.
Thanks, Richard. I'll try and come on camera if I can. Do excuse me. Thanks very much. Hello, Chris Waterman. Thank you very much. Most helpful. Here you speak quite bluntly and plainly, which is much appreciated, because often that does not happen. I think with regards to the HSE and building safety cases, I think it's personally, I think it's bonkers that there isn't a template yet, because what's going to end up happening is, I know there's some authorities and housing associations who have already submitted their draft cases and they've had to go back and amend them. So therefore they've had the opportunity, HSE have, of looking to see what suits what's best and therefore get that out. They're not going to have the capacity. No way are they going to have the capacity to go through each building safety case manually and go through, right, otherwise we'll be waiting a whole decade, I suppose. So a little bit disappointing, but I think, as Chris has said, it's not baby steps, and you're saying we need to take strides. I personally think we need to do a large sprint, because some organisations and some areas are still so far behind and in denial and of the opinion, we'll wait till others submit and then we'll follow suit. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, Samaya. And I think I've been invited to a building safety case seminar. I think it's early December. And of course, there is nothing to stop the industry from issuing a template, is there?
No, and
absolutely not.
That's something that we are trying to organise. And in fact, actually, the template that that's on the website, actually, it starts to bring together at least the documents that are needed. What we found was that people that are actually compiling the building safety cases, one of the challenges that they've got is that the information that they need to be able to do that is in so many different directorates or so many different parts of the organisation that it takes far longer to do than it needs to. So one of the things that we're trying to do is make it so that people can at least be properly prepared, so that they've got the right documents together.
Yeah, and I had this discussion, I think, at the Ventro masterclass, where somebody said, we don't want to be told what we have to do. And I disagreed totally, because in things like this, okay, you might want to put a blue cover on it instead of a green cover. You might want to handwrite the forward and put your signature on it, but 90% at a minimum of every building safety case must contain the same information. So
most definitely
use a template.
And the way things should be described should be consistent as well. So the way, for example, AOVs should be described. Should they be called AOVs or automatic opening vents or smoke vents? These are all terms that are interchangeable. And therefore it's much more sensible if we can actually pick one. Also, sorry to just carry on. The other thing is that we ought to be using Uniclass to identify things, because Uniclass is at least a classification system that is used both in construction and also in operations. So these are the sorts of things we ought to be standardising a lot of this stuff.
Right. Well, first of all, you can make a start on a glossary straight away, and thank you for volunteering. Secondly, when I do my desktop publishing, there's something called Pantone colours.
Yes.
and we need a Pantone colour approach to these things. And one final thing, I've learned quite a lot about fire doors, and somebody I'm supporting has got one of these doors, and the local authority and the local fire authority have just put up brand new signs what to do if a fire starts. And the last thing it says is, if a fire starts in a neighbour's flat, there's a tower block, stay inside your home, close all your windows and doors, and wait for the fire service to arrive. This is the crunch. You are, quote, completely safe for at least 1 hour. Well, she might be, as long as she's remembered to pull the Daily Mail out of the letterbox. And who's going to stay in a building for an hour after they've seen Grenfell endlessly shown? Just a thought.
Saz, have your
Yes,
question.
good afternoon. I just
Hello.
hello Chris, hello everyone. Just very quickly, I was at a webinar the other day and the health and safety executive were actually attending at that webinar, and it was about building safety case, which is quite interesting. So
Yeah.
one of the interesting things about it was obviously they were talking about registration of buildings. So we've obviously got to get our buildings registered.
Yeah.
Now, within that presentation, they were talking about obviously the tranches in terms of how they're going to prioritise their inspections and the information that you need to provide to get your certificate, your occupancy certificate. Now, what they have done is they've set up basically standardised questions that they're going to be asking everyone to submit. So they've got
Yeah.
a set of standard questions that you would need to complete. So they're going to have quite a lot of information beforehand because they're going to need that in terms of their tranches of for the inspections. So for the building safety case, they've also, what they have published was when we were having this discussion with the health and safety executive, they on the website, which I've posted both in the chat, by the way, was basically in terms of their expectations of what building case is. Now, you're quite right, Chris, that they're in terms of a standardized template, there's been a lot of discussion around this, and like you're saying, they're sort of going backwards and forwards, and I agree that there needs to be some sort of national standardization of having a template so that you can, you're not sort of assessing apples and pears, if you know what I mean. And that's the problem. And that's the same with, the FRAs was the same thing, wasn't it? You need a standardized template. So you've got that nationally, and because otherwise it makes it very, very difficult. So it was interesting, these discussions coming up, because obviously everybody else, we're working on safety case ourselves, and everyone's pushing their software in terms of your data collection, what you need. We all know we've got gaps in our data and how we best try and find that data or obtain that information which is very, very costly and so not just costly in terms of resources. So, for instance, if you need to know about your external walls, if you haven't got the O&M manuals and the information about it, you're having to commission, consultants to go and take bits off your building. So there's all of these things that we're all aware of. But I just said what I've done is I've posted a few things on the webs on the chat, but also that in terms of the safety case and the information that health and safety executive want, they have got a standard list of the information or that they are going to be requiring, because when they do the safety case and they start their tranches of inspections, what they're looking at is not just the height of the building, but the occupancy. So the greater the occupancy of the building, the greater the risk. Therefore, that is going to be in the first tranches. And there will be exceptions to that where you've got remedial works or buildings where cladding works and remedial works are going on. So that will be in the first tranche of inspections as well. But I just thought I'd throw that in there so that people are aware in case they miss that.
Yeah, right. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of that, and I'm not sure how good the HSE is at promoting that. And again, to move sideways, I've just negotiated attendance allowance. This person I'm supporting, and she didn't think she could get attendance allowance because she did not want a social worker in the house. Well, attendance allowance doesn't mean that at all. But also, I've learned that the attendance allowance forms are read by low-level clerks, and I'm not criticising them. And it's only if you say things 20 times, the same thing, that they escalate it to the person who can approve attendance allowance. And so it's essentially, you know, HSE, I'll go back and look and see what they've said publicly, what's on their website. Are they being proactive? Because why should it take you, and I'm glad you've done what you've done, why should it take you to tell people who haven't spotted it?
Yeah,
Okay.
good
And
point.
I don't
good
mind,
point.
I don't mind being blunt.
Yeah,
Because-
yeah, I think we've got that.
As a self-unemployed pensioner, nobody's got any hold on me, so I can say what I like and normally do. Matt.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, in relation to the HSE, having spoken to them a number of times, and this also cuts across with the fire safety regulations as well, that the solutions to these problems have been deliberately pushed to industry and the supply chain, and
Yes.
there's been a hand washing. But when it comes to building safety regulators specifically, I think one of the key things that I've picked up that they've overlooked is the scale of the problem that, you know, from the supply side.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly having a conversation with one of the HSE non-execs, and, you know, he was talking about oil rigs and chemical plants and things like that.
Yeah.
So I sort of said, well, how many oil rigs are there that you manage? And he said, oh, I don't know, probably about 100 in the UK. And I said, well, we're looking at 13,000 high-rise buildings. So, and you're in an area that, you know, the risks associated with processing and refining or drilling for oil are far better understood than providing homes for people to live in high-rise buildings, right? So, and the risk level's different. And the competence and the culture. And so I was talking really about what are you doing about culture change? How are you going to explain the reality of a risk-based regulatory regime that's going from rules-based? Yeah. And that penny hasn't really dropped, I think, in the industry yet. My view on this is I'm not sure we're ever going to see a template. I don't think there will ever be within that regulatory regime what constitutes the right answer to the question. We do a lot of work with people like FCA regulated firms in finance. The way that regulatory regime works is risk-based, and it's one of, we will apply hindsight after the event to review whether your risk management activity was or was not effective. We will apply hindsight to that. On the post-event, pre-event, there are affirmations or attestations of things that you say that you're doing, and it's not until you're either one of the very few that are audited or you fall under a bus that's put under the spotlight. And I think that's what I would say to accountable persons they need to get their heads around. There will not be a checklist, and it's massively unhelpful because the lack of the rules makes it far more hard for the BSR to actually regulate. And that comes back to the scaling thing, that what on earth are these 600 people that they're trying to recruit going to be doing? Who's going to pay for them? Yeah. How inefficient are they going to be? Because if they're looking at 130 pages of unstructured PDF document, they are not going to get anywhere. Back to the previous point that was mentioned, they're just not going to get through the workload, and we're going to grind to a halt. So there needs to be some automation, there needs to be some repetition because of the scale. You know, if there were 45 high-rise buildings, fine, you know, spend a week talking about each one, not a problem, you can scale that. But when you're doing that 13,000 times, you will grind to a halt within about 5 minutes.
And that's why standardization of data is so critical.
Right, but if the first person that gets their safety case approved publishes it, and then the second person does, then the industry can do a template, and, you know, who cares what HSE think? And the other thing I would say about hindsight is perhaps after the next high-rise fire, they'll hold the meeting in the cemetery where the victims are buried.
No, I understand all of that, but taking the emotion out of it, I don't think the point of having a safety case approved, you don't. You get a building assurance certificate at the end of the process,
Okay.
of which the safety case is a part of that submission. So
yeah,
either you'll get the assurance, but ultimately whether that safety case was sufficient or not, they will apply hindsight to that judgment, I would say, in a risk-based regulatory regime, and that's the difference. You can't turn around and say, well, I'm absolved from any liability here because you signed off my safety case.
no.
So that's because it was going to be, there was a different name for the building assurance certificate before, and they withdrew it because it did imply that this is a safe building, and actually even being under the BSR does not assure a safe building. You know,
I think the point you made the point very well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris. I think Matt made the point very well, and that is that it's not possible for it to be a rules-based system. It's a risk-based system, and that was one of the things that it took me some time to get my head around, because I come at things from an asset management point of view, where there is a clear rule, a clear set of instructions that you have to do. Whereas actually the HSE, when they briefed us in terms of what we needed to do, it's more from a point of view of what's a hazard, what's the risk that hazard is actually going to happen, and then what mitigations have you got in place to actually prevent that from happening. And those scenarios are the things that need to be articulated in the safety case, and there's so many variables that's the challenge, really.
George, can you put your camera on? Then we can see if you're looking to speak.
No, sure. I'm finished now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. It was just a point.
Was there another hand up briefly?
Oh, it's just thank you, Jack, for putting in the comments, because I haven't got my paperwork in front of me. So he said it was the building assurance certificate. It's now the building assessment certificate. Yeah. This is an assessed building as opposed to an assured building, which is a massive departure. But yes, it's and because I don't know you, Chris, I've been extremely vocal for many years. I don't like the Building Safety Act and how I think it's an overreaction, etc., etc. And actually, I'm a very strong advocate of what we're seeing in the fire safety regulations in terms of that in the occupancy phase, doing a lot of what we're talking about already. So I don't want it to come across that I'm banging the drum for the Building Safety Act at all.
No, that's fine. The
George.
other thing. Oh yeah.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry.
I was just going to ask Chris. I mean, what you're producing there, Chris, is it possible to get a PDF version of that we could have on the BIM4Housing website? Because that sounds as though it's going to be a fantastic resource.
Well, the problem. Well, what I intend to do, I'm well on the way with part 1 and part 2, which is the first 30 sections of the Act, and the same with the explanatory notes, and that will probably be volume 1.
Yes.
What I would like to do is test that with some of the audience.
Yeah.
And then revise that in the light of those comments before I complete the rest of the job. It's, it'll take.
Yeah.
That would be perfect for us, because that's really the way we're working. We've got a community of subject matter experts, and people that want the information from subject matter experts as well. So we can plug that in very well.
Right, but I have to say that I think it cost me about 1,500 quid to do a much less sophisticated building safety bill, because it's a lot of words, and this will be a priced publication.
Yeah,
sure.
And the other thing it will have as appendices, although some people I've spoken to want it put at the front, is a series of diagrams And the other thing it will have, hopefully, is an excellent index, so that you will know every time an accountable person is mentioned in the Act. So you can look them up.
Yeah.
You will know every time a landlord is mentioned, and you will know every time a villain is mentioned, because you just look under developer. No, sorry, that was a mistake. What I mean is, but you can fine grain the search facility. I did ask, I think at London Build, the people to put their hand up if they knew a builder that hadn't taken a shortcut. And I didn't even need any fingers to count the hands that went up. And the other bit is the culture change is getting the jobbing carpenter, I think, is it still called the lump? Getting the people on the lump to make sure they use the right bits and put in the right cross wires in their walls and stuff. That is the issue. And finally, not finally, but the other thing that the culture change, what depresses me about the current administration is it is essentially deregulatory. We had the bonfire of the Quangos. Fire services have had their resources cut. So instead of sending out inspectors, they're probably sending out a fireman who isn't fighting a fire, which is a bit like me going into McDonald's, not that I ever would, coming out, having eaten my beef burger, and the Michelin guide says, "Would you rate that restaurant, Chris?" When I've never been into the kitchen. So I think there's a whole cultural shift that I'm also trying to explain to the people in here who, might put some pressure on.
I think we could also help promote it. So if you put a charge for publication,
We've already got some actually people in the chat who are saying they want to buy it.
yeah. So in other words, we've got BIM4Housing marketing or publications.
Yeah, and if you let me see the people in the chat, and if half a dozen of them would like to look at the draft of the first section, and they'll get one free in exchange for their comments, because nothing is for nothing in this world. But that would really help me.
I'm sure we'll have no problem getting some very good people to actually fulfill that role, I can assure you. We are actually now, well, we have run out of time. So I'm going to say, well, thank you to everybody, obviously, for coming along. Thank you to the speakers, and especially to our special guest, Chris. And I hope you'll continue to come to our meetings and continue to contribute.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I do weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, and I am the honorary parliamentary satirist.
Yeah.
And I've just produced packets of Cadbury's Conservative Government Festive Fun Total Balls for Christmas.
Just on the last note, we are looking actually to moving forward into the new year that we will be having guest speakers with some regularity. So watch this space. It obviously gives us a particular new viewpoint and livens things up a bit, doesn't it?
And if anybody knows anybody,
yeah,
if you've got any suggestions in the audience, if you've got any suggestions as to who can contribute, then that would be helpful.
We'll be very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks again to everybody, and Chris, we'll be in touch. We want those publications.
And I've missed Prime Minister's questions. There's a loss.
Cheers, bye.
Cheers, Chris. Take care.
Bye.